but I do want to check in with Leith Van Onselen, the Chief Economist and the co-founder of Macro Business, also former economist with the Victorian and Australian Treasuries. Leith, good afternoon.
G'day, Jacqui. How are you?
Well, look, I'm so interested in talking to you today because you've had lived experience working with the Victorian Treasury. When you hear these comments in the payout committee today, what did you think when the government says, we're just hoping we don't get a downgrade? Like, is that normal?
Yeah, it does seem a little bit foolhardy, doesn't it? I mean, all the major credit rating agencies, so talking about Standard & Poor's and Moody's, have warned Victoria that we risk having a credit rating downgrade if we don't get our debt situation under control. So I would have thought that the bureaucrats at the Victorian Treasury might have actually decided to model that and see what the impact would be on interest payments and the economy.
Okay, so what will it mean if we get downgraded? How much extra will we have to pay when we borrow money?
Yeah, so we don't know exactly, but the Victorian budget said that forecast that Victoria's interest expense annually will be about $10.6 billion by 2029. So if a credit rating downgrade, for example, increases our average interest cost by 0.25%, so 25 basis points, that's like one, RBA rate increase, if you want to think about it that way. That'll increase our interest bill by about $25 million a year or $26 million a year. And if it pushes up our interest rate by 1%, it'll increase our interest bill by about $100 million a year.
Oh.
Now, I'm not sure, whether it'll be 25 basis points or 100 or anywhere in between, but it is obviously a significant cost. And all it means is that ultimately the Victorian government will have less money to spend elsewhere on health, on public transport and all this other stuff, or we'll be paying higher taxes.
Higher taxes? What else can we be taxed on, Leith?
That's a good question. We're pretty much sold off all the family jewels in terms of, public assets, that sort of thing. And obviously they're squeezing us squeezing us pretty hard everywhere else. So, it'll probably have to be funded by, cutbacks and that sort of thing.
What, cutbacks to the public service? Because they wouldn't talk about that today.
No, and look, to be honest with you, that the bloating of the public service is one of the reasons why we're in this hole. So Victoria's had the biggest increase in public servants out of all the states in the last, 15 years. And the Victorian wage bill's risen from $19.5 billion when the current Labor government came to office in 2014-15 and to $44 billion projected by 2029. So that is one of the reasons why we're in this hole. We've had a massive blowout in public servants, as well as obviously our infrastructure projects have been way over time and way over budget.
It concerns me that you're saying we might have to put up taxes. Now, you wrote a piece for Macro Business last week. The headline was, Victoria is a giant economic sinkhole. Is what we're talking about today what you mean?
Yeah, a little bit. So look, I'll be honest, I was being pretty cheeky, but this came out after Victoria basically received an extra $7.5 billion in GST. This current year and next year. And effectively now Victoria's receiving $1.07 for every dollar raised. And, it was a broader commentary on Victoria's economic model. So as we know, Victoria's economy revolves around importing masses of people from overseas who then require services, homes, infrastructure, that sort of thing. It's not a particularly sustainable model. And this unsustainability is shown by our trade deficit. So Victoria's exports have barely grown over the last 20 years, whereas the state's imports have absolutely soared. And the reason why they've soared is we've imported millions of people who don't actually help us earn export revenue, but who then just buy, flat screen TVs, imported cars, etc. And as a result, the state's imports have risen from about $20 billion, this is adjusted for inflation, at the turn of the century to nearly $100 billion currently. So our entire economic model isn't particularly sustainable. It's based around just growing Melbourne like a science experiment. Melbourne's population is projected to grow by 3.5 million people by 2050 from now. And just to put that into perspective, it took us 170 years roughly to get to 3.5 million at the turn of the century. So we're supposed to grow by that again in the next 35 years, which is obviously just going to make our living standards a lot worse. It's going to plough the government in deeper into debt because it's going to have to build a whole bunch of infrastructure and provide extra services to all these extra people. It's not a sustainable model, and that's pretty much why I called us a sinkhole economy. We don't have any genuine industry in this state.
No.
The whole model revolves around importing millions of people to build houses, sell coffees to, and build infrastructure for. It's not very sustainable.
What a depressing outlook, Leith. It's always good to have you on this show, but I feel utterly depressed. Thank you.
No worries, Jacqui.
Tony Tardio. It reminds me of the phrase "the rust bucket state," doesn't
well,
it?
yeah.
But it's
Leith needs his own show or his own segment.
Wait,
on
do you want
the
him? Do you want,
show.
do you want us to give him a seg?
Well, yeah, absolutely, because
But
he explains it in
He
a very
does. That's
clear
why I
and
wanted to get
concise
him
way.
on. Yeah.
And I think people need to hear what he's saying.
Well, what
'cause-
he's saying about taxes going up or cuts to other things
Yeah.
to pay for the interest that is going to be incurred. Because if you're a credit rating, and again, we're not economists, but if you're a credit rating agency, wouldn't you look at our level in debt and go, that's a bit high?
Of course. And you'd looked at the fact that the taxes are already high, so where's the other money going to come from?
Oh, I don't know.
It is pretty depressing, but you see, people need to hear the entire picture because I don't think they're getting it, not from the opposition and certainly not from the government.
That is a wise comment as always, Tony.